What's good, YouTube? In today's video, I'm going to be showing y'all how you can build melodies from the ground up. I'll be showing y'all how to build melodies all the way from nothing to a finished product, and I'll be explaining the entire process. So with all that being said, let's jump right into it. Before I put down any melodies, the first thing I'm going to do is just put down a minor scale in an empty sampler track. So I just have my couple plugins open here and then just an empty sampler. So what I'm going to do is go up to this stamp, click on it, and I'm going to go down to where it says minor natural. And I'm just gonna click and drop this on C just to start with and extend the notes out like this. So what this is the minor natural scale, or just a minor scale for short. And this is gonna be pretty helpful in showing you like the building blocks of what notes you can use in your melodies. You don't necessarily have to stick to this, but it's just the easiest way to get started. I'm gonna be saying a few numbers in these videos. All those numbers are referring to are these notes right here. So the number 1 refers to the root note in the scale, which is in this case C. The number 2 is D. 3, D sharp, so on and so forth. So each minor scale has 7 notes. Once you get to the 8th note, it just repeats at 1. So A sharp is 7, C7 would then be 8, but it just goes back to 1. D7 would be 2, D sharp 3, and so on and so forth. So now that we got that preface out the way, there's 2 main types of melodies that I want to discuss in this video, or I kind of want to break it into 2 sections. And those 2 sections are dark melodies and melodic melodies. And you construct these a little bit differently. The main difference is just the difference of using certain notes in the scale. So we'll start off with dark melodies. So for dark melodies, you pretty much use all of the notes in the scale except for the 7th note. So if I put this an octave up, these are kind of the notes that you would use. I don't know the exact reason behind this, but in almost every dark beat I've ever made, I've very rarely used the 7th note in the scale. Again, you can use it, but it's a lot easier to get that dark sound if you just keep these notes. And the notes that you really want to focus on are these ones right here that are only a half step apart from each other. I'm looking at the 2nd and 3rd and the 5th and 6th notes in the scale. You're going to build heavily along these because these 2 sets of notes build a lot of tension. So not to say that you have to use them, but it just makes it a lot easier to get that darker sound. So I'm just going to go ahead and show y'all an example of a dark melody real quick. And so for the sake of following along, I'm going to make the whole scale again. And I'm going to copy this down an octave and take this and copy down another one just so it's easier to see what I'm doing. And so for my dark melody example, I'm going to use a different scale. I'm actually going to use the D minor scale. So I'm just going to move everything up 2. To do that on Windows, you just hold shift and press the up arrow 2 times. Each click of the up arrow moves it up a half step. And so that's just kind of a quick way you can transpose things. And I'll touch on that a little bit more later. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Keyscape. And I'm going to open up a piano preset. I'm just going to start with a low octave piano here. So I'm going to start with a root note of D. And I'll copy that down 1 octave as well. All right, so I'm gonna go to the Ignite analog kit and go ahead and just lay down a little melody right here. So I'm using those same 5 notes that I highlighted earlier, 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 in the scale. Again, looking at this so far, I've not used C at all. And I'm gonna go ahead and just throw some more like counter notes on the top octave here. And again, you're gonna see that I'm not really gonna use C or the 7th note in the scale. So just kind of going back, I'll explain my thought process a little bit. So I just wanted to start with a bass note. Typically this is just the root note in the scale. It doesn't have to be, but it's just the easiest if you start with your root note. And then I opened up another sound to put in a top melody. And I started with the general shape of a D minor chord or D minor triad, which is right here, 1, 3, and 5 in the minor scale. And then I just went ahead and chopped up the middle note right here into these two. And I shifted up to the 6th note in the scale right here, just moving this 5th up one. And again, just kind of using that same little repeating action here. And then at the end, I just switched it up by using the 4th note in the scale, G, this right here, instead of that little middle note. And then for the top notes, I just kind of filled it out. However, I'll just add a little faster top melody also, just something kind of repetitive. And I'm just gonna go ahead and just kind of run down the scale. So this is just that little quick top counter melody. I'll go ahead and turn off that pad just so y'all can hear it a little easier. So it's pretty basic. All it's really doing is just using the same notes that I've been using, which is just the 1st, 6th, 5th, 3rd, 2nd note in the scale. The only switch up is I just have this little G here at the end, kind of similar to the first one. It's just these individual 8th notes, you know, just these little choppy notes here instead of having those longer drawn out ones. That's pretty much how I go about making my dark melodies. I'll just lay down a bass note and then I'll open up one plugin and just lay down a melody that either looks something like this or something kind of similar to this. And you can just play around with all just different scale notes here with the ghost notes. Honestly, just go from there. Practice, experiment. That's just the best advice I got for that. So that wraps up the dark section of it, that like future Travis Scott, Metro Boomin, Southside type of sound. So now moving on to the melodic component. This has a little bit broader of a meaning. Melodic beats kind of range anywhere from like a Rod Wave, Lil Durk type of beat to even something that has an analog sound like Lil Baby. So I'm gonna go ahead into the sampler track here and we'll use D minor again. So minor natural and click it in right here. So for melodic beats, you're going to be using the same scale, and for your bass notes or notes and chords, all of these notes are fair play, but typically for your top melodies, you don't use the 6th note in the scale. The 7th note kind of has a more major component into it, the way that it leads back into the 1st note in the scale, which just makes it sound a little bit happier, which is really what separates it from that dark or more melancholy sound. So I'll make a couple different melodies or a couple different samples to kind of explain this. The first will be a pain sample. So I'm just going to take this and drop these all a few octaves here. And so I'll open up a piano here. We'll start from the bottom and just move it up again. So we'll start with our 1st note D, and I'm just gonna make a really basic pain beat, just the 1-7-6 go-to bass line here. I'm actually gonna shift these over a little bit. And just kind of repeat it. So I have 1, 7, 6, and then the 4th note in the scale, which I might take out, but I'm just leaving it there for now. Then I have the 7th, the 6th, 7th, and 1st. And then from here, we just build chords. So you're gonna take all these, shift click, and move them up 1 octave. And the way you make chords is just by skipping 1 note in the scale and placing the next. So we'll skip E, place 1 on F, skip G, place 1 on A. There you have a minor chord. And so some ways that you can spice this up is by moving some of these an octave up or down. But just to start, I'm gonna go ahead and fill out the chords and we can kind of play around with the notes after that. And then same thing with these over here. So as you can see, I already moved this bottom note up 1 octave just so it's a little more cohesive. And so for these, I think I'm just going to take, for these first couple, I'll drop these an octave. And maybe for this one, I'll put it up an octave and make a copy here. or what I'll do is put a 7th note on this. And then I'll kind of do the same thing for these over here. I'll just kind of, I'll drop these an octave, maybe these two, so we get a little different vibe. But at the end of the day, these are all the same notes as they would normally be. They're just kind of different octaves, so they sound kind of unique. So we got our basic chord progression here. And also what I'm going to do is take all these bottom notes here and copy them down an octave, and lower the velocities. So I'm going to take all these, hit Alt S just to strum them, Alt R to play with the velocities a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and throw in a top melody with this. And I'm just going to do this all in one pattern because it's all going to be a piano anyways. All of these melody notes are fair game except for the 6th note in the scale. So you'll probably notice that I'm not going to be using a whole lot of A sharp, if at all. Alright, so that took me a few minutes, but if we look at A sharp right here, you notice that I didn't use it whatsoever. I did use it earlier, but I ended up changing it just because it sounded kind of weird. So I dropped it down to F instead. I also did use a note that wasn't in the scale right here. These are called accidentals, and I just kind of use these to kind of roll into the note, almost like you're actually playing the piano, like you can kind of slip into the note, if that makes any sense. It's kind of the same premise as the dark melody, where you start off with some bass notes, except this time I built some chords off of them. I also put in a top melody, just kind of penciling in stuff using the scale highlighting here. And just to round out the sample, I'll add a couple of more instruments. I'll go ahead and use this, this saxophone. Again, for this counter melody, I just played around with different notes in the scale until I came up with something. Pretty much what I said before. You're going to use every note except for that 6th note in the scale. I mean, again, you could, but it just sounds kind of weird. I'll switch some of these A's to A sharps, and you'll kind of see that it doesn't really fit. And so now I'll go ahead and make a melodic trap type of sound. So this one, I'm not gonna start it on the root note of D, I'm gonna go ahead and start on A sharp, which is the 6th note, so I'm gonna go like this and just kind of work down the scale. So it's 6, 5, 3, 4, and I'll just leave this kind of quiet, but this is going to be the basis of the melody here. I'm going to go back to that Analog Lab preset that I had from earlier. So I'm going to keep these just an octave down, and I'm pretty much just going to just have the 1st and 5th note repeating above it. I'm going to go ahead and lower this tempo to 120 and then move all these half. It'll make more sense as we go through it. And then I'm gonna take this and just layer it with this Analog Lab also. So I'm pretty much just gonna take the same thing from this, copy it, put it into this pattern. So then I'm gonna go to Serum and grab like a synth or a lead or something. So I'm gonna grab this lead out of my Resonance Serum bank. Alright, so this took another few minutes, but again, lay down another counter melody, kind of melodic sound. We're not really using A sharp. You might see in some of the cuts that I did end up having it as part of the pattern at one point, and it just didn't really mesh well with the rest of it. As far as building the melodies, that's pretty much all I wanted to cover. One last thing that I want to do is show y'all how to transpose your melodies really quickly. And this is going back to the thing that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, where if you just shift all the notes up or down, it changes the key. So for example, we're in D minors. If I wanted to move this pattern to B minor, for example, we just count the number of keys we're moving down on the piano. So we move down 1, 2, 3 piano keys. So if I wanted to change this whole pattern to B minor, all I do is just select all these channel clips that have melodies in them and just highlight it with right click. And then on the top left here, I'm gonna go click the little arrow, transpose selected. And since we're gonna move down 3, we're gonna do minus for moving down and then 3 for the number of times we're shifting it. And if we go to our sampler here, it's in B minor, and all of our other melodies will also be in B minor. And if we want to transpose up, it's the same thing, just the opposite direction. So we're currently in B minor, and let's say we wanted to move it to E minor. We just count up the piano again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we select everything here, go here, transpose selected, do +5. Plus to move it up, 5 is the number of times you're moving it. And now everything is in E minor. And And you can also do this once you've already broken them up. So this is all one pattern clip. So let's say we've already split these up and they're in the channel rack already. What we can do now is go and select all of these. You click one, you could do control click. If you want to select them quickly, you hold shift and click and it selects them all. Then you're gonna right click, same thing, transpose. And let's say we want to move it down to back to D minor. So we'll go -2. And now if we go here, we can see our bottom note here is D. And it's back to the original pitch that I made it in. So that's the last little bit that I want to cover. All right, so my face cam stopped working, so there's no face cam for this outro, but I hope y'all found this video pretty helpful. Let me know if y'all enjoyed these types of videos where I'm just kind of going over more general ideas instead of specific how-tos. Yeah, that's going to wrap it up for this one, and I'll see y'all in the next video.